Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my what I read in March. I can't believe it's already April. I feel like I kind of had a bit of a crappy reading month this month, to be totally honest with you. I read a lot of books, like not a lot, less than in February. February was a sick month, but more than in January. But I don't know. Like if I was rating by stars, I don't know how many 5-star reads that would have been in there this month. I just didn't have the best reading month. I think it was a lot of ebook reading during work, which I hope nobody from my work watches this video. It's never when I'm supposed to be doing stuff. But yeah, maybe that's something to think about. Maybe I should read less ebooks. Anyway, let's get on to the wrap up. Just so you know, behind you, I've got my screen with all my reviews and my data. So that's where my eyes are going. So yeah, like I said, in March 2021, I read 18 books total. The genre breakdown of these books, I read 2 contemporary books, 3 fantasy books, 1 historical fiction, 1 mystery, 4 romance, 3 sci-fi, and 1 that I classified as poetry, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Format-wise, we had 8 physical books and 10 ebooks, which kind of sounds about right. Reading by source, so that is either library, gift, purchased, or loaned by a friend. We had 12 books from the library, so yay library. 0 gifted. Someone's got to give me some gifts. 4 books that I purchased myself and 2 books that were loaned from a friend. So a pretty sweet breakdown there, I think. Reading by age. In March, I read 14 adult books and 4 YA books. And my average days to finish a book in March was 4 days. That was a lot of 2-day reads and then a couple really long day reads. By comparison, average days in January was 5 days, average days in February was 3. Just kind of on that topic. Yeah, I had 1 book that took me 15 days, 1 book that took me 12 days. So for me, that's a really long time. 1 that took me 8 days, that was a workbook. 1 that took me 9 days. Yeah, so I don't know, a pretty unmotivated month, to be totally honest, but you know what, it's gonna be totally okay. Total pages I read in March was 6,622 pages, contrasting that to February, which is 9,113, and for a shorter month, that's pretty wild. January was 6,304 pages. And then overall this year, that brings it to 22,311 pages that I have read. And that doesn't even count all the nonsense articles that I read on the internet. So, you know what? I might be a little bit down on myself, but to be totally honest, it feels good. I did good. So without further ado, I'm going to go straight on to my what I read in March. If you watched my what I hope to read in March video, you can just scrap that completely because I did not follow that plan. It did not go to plan. I now know that I should not create TBRs because it does nothing for me. And that's okay. Now I know. So the first book that I read in the month of March was Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This book was on my TBR. It's a young adult kind of mystery contemporary fiction book. It's about this girl, Enchanted, who wants to become an R&B singer. And I know that sounds a bit like whatever. But basically, she pretty much gets groomed by this legendary singer, this legendary artist, because he spots her at this audition. And she's all obviously drawn into that because she wants to be famous. And he's like, yeah, baby, I can make you famous. This is not a spoiler because the first chapter of the book starts with this. But basically, the book starts with a dead body. It's absolutely wild. It's... yeah, absolutely wild. And all the signs are pointing to Enchanted because you're like, she has reasons. Would definitely recommend this book. It was such a good read. I was so drawn into it. I think I read it in about 2 days. So yeah, that's it's pretty quick read, honestly. The next book that I read in the month of March was Cersei by Madeline Miller. If you remember last month, I read the other one, Song of Achilles, and I loved it, and I was like, heck yeah, give me all the mythology. So I read Cersei, and oh my goodness, did I love this book. I love Cersei as a main character. Incredible. So Cersei is basically about, I guess she's the son of Helios, who's the sun god, and she's like a nymph. So she has powers, but everybody's like, whatever, your powers don't count. Turns out she's actually this super powerful witch. And so like she can transform her rivals into like crazy monsters, and famously she turns Odysseus and his men into pigs. Well, his men, not him, I don't think. Anyway, it's part of, you know the story of the Odyssey, right? It's in that, she's in there. We get to meet all of these just like super fun like characters from Greek mythology. Yeah, this was such a great book. I want more stories of the women in Greek mythology, to be totally honest with you. She's an incredible character. Madeline Miller writes so lyrically that it just kind of, the book just flowed along. It was like pretty long, but I really couldn't stop reading it. We meet Cersei when she's like this like innocent nymph, and she gets banished to go live on this island because her mighty parents were like, your powers are scary, go away. So she gets banished. We also get to see Icarus, like the myth of Icarus. Well, kind of we get to see it through his father's eyes, with the wings and the Minotaur. So it's just really fun to see how all these stories that are so famous link back to Cersei. It also depicts motherhood in like such a beautiful, really cool way. It hit me in my feels. Didn't hit me in my feels as much as Song of Achilles did, but definitely would recommend this book. Up next, I read The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is an adult romance book. If you remember from just a couple minutes ago, I read a lot of romance books this month. It was like the highest quantity out of everything. So I don't really know why that is. I don't think I'm really like a romance fan, but whatever. This is an enemies to lovers story. Lucy is like, obviously she works in like publishing or something, and she shares an office with this guy, Joshua Templeman, and they hate each other, and he's just like suave and cool and like, expensive suits, and she like dresses in like cardigans, and it's like really tiny. She's tiny. They never stop talking about how tiny she is. And basically they have all these like games, like the staring game and the mirror game, and like it's just like ways that they can like flirt while pretending that they hate each other. And basically there's this promotion. They're both up for it. If whoever wins, they're going to be the other person's boss. So now and then she starts having like steamy dreams about him. All this stuff happens. I did not like this book. It didn't stop me reading it. I read it all really quickly. But there's one line that I quoted in my review that just kind of sums up why I hated this book. I record whether you're wearing this is Joshua talking. I record whether you're wearing a dress or skirt. I make a mark when we argue, and I make a mark when I see you smile at someone else. Also, when I wish I could kiss you. The dots are just my lunch break. And I feel like it was an attempt at being really funny, but it just wasn't funny to me. Joshua was not, I didn't like him at all. He was entitled. It was such a case of like the poor little rich boy. Lucy was literally no better. I had no sympathy for her. She was a whiny, annoying like child, and kind of they both deserve each other. So whatever. Credit to Sally Thorne though, the writer. I did not like either of the main characters, and I still finished the book. So that's good, I guess. The next book that I read was Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. This book I picked up because Remy, who I host the Getting Lit podcast with, she recommended it, and I was like, okay, into it. We'll see what happens. This book is kind of like I classified it as a sci-fi book. I read it in ebook format. It took me only 2 days. Like, it was a good read. So basically, it's kind of about this woman, Franny Stone. She's a researcher, and they're like going to Greenland to follow the last Arctic terns in the world. That's a bird. So she kind of talks her way onto this fishing boat. They set sail, and you kind of start to learn all about like Franny's history and all her secrets and all of that. It was kind of like an eco-contemporary novel. So last month or the month before, I read Annihilation and that trilogy, the Jeff Vandermeer trilogy. And I guess it's kind of, in the same genre as that. It's a quiet book. Like it's written slowly and kind of secretively and ponderingly. It was, this was actually a really wonderful book. She's writing letters to her husband. It's like a sad love story. Would definitely recommend it if you want to be in your feels a little bit. The next book that I read was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is another young adult fantasy. And this took me like a minute to get into, just kind of the world building. I don't know why, I just found it a little bit complicated, which is weird because it was just dark academia fantasy, which is the most common, but whatever. Once I was in to this book, I was in it. I loved Bree, who's the main character. She was so cool, so real, really tough, really intelligent, but like believably intelligent. And I think that's awesome. And her banter was amazing. She was so much fun to read. The book combines so many of like my favorite topics. So like there were Arthurian legends, dark academia, cool intricate magic systems, a lot of conversation on race relations, loss, dark and broody boys. Like, yeah, so fun. If you've read the book, I'm Team Cell all the way. Don't care about Nick at all. He feels possessive and he feels needy. I think that's a trait that I hate in books, maybe. But still, read this book. Tell me what team you're on. There was like a lot of really cool representation in this book as well, in a way that for me didn't feel tokenistic at all. It just felt like it was there, right? Like life is. So that was really cool. I do wish that we'd had more scenes of Bree and Alice. Alice is like Bree's best friend. I think they're roommates. Because I want more friends, and I loved Alice as a character, but I think that there's a sequel coming. So maybe we'll get more Bree and Alice then. Up next, I read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson, the famous fantasy writer. This is one of his like more young adult or like new adult books. For some reason, I thought he was going to be a really complicated writer. So I was like, I'll kind of ease in. But yeah, this was awesome. I'm so excited to read the sequel. I'm still on the list at the library for it. I don't know if it's a series that I'll purchase. But basically, this is about Spencer, who's this teenage girl, and she really wants to be a pilot. Her dad was a pilot, and they were all like, you're a traitor, boo on that. And so Spencer is a 17-year-old girl. She's part of this group of like shipwrecked humans living in this like ruined world who are under constant attack from these kind of alien creatures called the Krell. And so like her father, she wants to be a fighter pilot, but she's not allowed to because they're like, you are a coward and a traitor. The book kind of seemed like a prelude to what the real stuff in book 2 is going to be about. But I really love this world. I really like the character. Spencer, again, was like a badass, really cool. Really excited to continue on with these books. Okay, up next, I'm going to talk about these 3 books all together. But I did read them kind of spaced apart just because of library holds. So I read the Brown Sisters trilogy. So that's Get a Life, Chloe Brown. It's Take a Hint, Dani Brown. And Act Your Age, Eve Brown. So these Brown sisters, they are sisters. I think it goes oldest to youngest. And they're all romance novels following like their journeys to love. And I loved these books. I love these books. I love the sisters, all of them. I don't know which of these books is my favorite book. I think maybe the first one was my favorite because it was kind of my first exposure to the sisters and their relationships. And I was just like so happy to like have them in my life for like the 2 days it took me to read each book. But I'll quickly summarize. So Chloe Brown she's chronically ill. I don't know what she has, but so she has a chronic illness. She's like a computer gal. I think she's a programmer, and she's not like dying, but she kind of in her mind she's like, oh, my life is over, but she's come up with this list of things that she like wants to do before she can't do them anymore. So she's done one thing, which is moving out of her family home. The other ones are like a drunken night out, ride on a motorcycle, go camping, and she meets this guy Redford, but Red is what we call him, and he's her handyman in her new apartment building, and he's got a motorbike and tattoos, and like, you know, he's like a bad boy, but he's also like an artist, and she like sees through his window. He's like doing all these paintings at nighttime. It's like his little secret. So this is a Friends to Lovers book. Like he's there and he's like, yeah, girl, I'm gonna take you on all these adventures. Like, hell yeah, let's check off this list. And then obviously one of the things on the list is to have meaningless but thoroughly enjoyable sex. And so obviously that happens. And then obviously it's not meaningful. But this story was just so cute, so good. The spicy scenes were very spicy, but they never felt out of place or forced. I loved Chloe so much. We get to meet the other sisters kind of as we go. So if you want to read just one of the books, you totally can. I just think it's kind of nice to be able to read them in order so you have the background. And when they mention things, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. I found the ending of this book like a little bit weak. I was like, that was quick. But tied it up all nicely, you know, not complaining. The second one was Take a Hint, Dani Brown. So Dani, or Danica Brown, is the second sister. She is like academic, bisexual, super professional, super successful. But she's like, romance, don't need it. Hell no. The trope in this book is fake dating. I find fake dating a little bit repetitive. There's only so much you can do with it. But I loved Zafir so much. He was such a great love interest. Because he's a rugby coach, and like they kind of like go viral on the internet because he like carries her out of this building. It's a whole thing. Yeah, I'm just like not a fake dating fan. The stakes are so low. Like I just, you know, there's like not really any anticipation. But Dani was amazing, and yeah, super, super fun read. The final one in the trilogy here is Act Your Age, Eve Brown. Eve is the younger sister. She's like a little flighty. She's 25, so that was cute because I'm 26. So I was like, oh, relatable, girl. In the blurb, it says she's a certified hot mess, and I was like, I'm going to love this girl. But basically, she works really hard, she tries really hard, but everything just kind of goes wrong for her. That's just like her brand. It's like when she meets Jacob or Jake, she like literally crashes her car into him. So on brand, very fun. He breaks his arm, and yeah, their relationship was so freaking cute. Legit, this one brought me the closest to tears. She has these like big realizations about herself and about him, and like, so good. So I would thoroughly recommend reading any or all of this trilogy. Okay, up next, I read Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book, to start off, I love Ishiguro. I read Never Let Me Go for my A-level English, and you know when you get so in-depth on a book, you can't not love it, you know, like, because you know literally everything that there is to know about this book. That's how I feel about Never Let Me Go, and so I was excited and nervous to read Clara and the Sun. But I was torn between this and Cersei for my top book of the month, but I'm making the executive decision right now that my top book of the month is Clara and the Sun. So basically, this is like in the near future, or like parallel to now. In the world, they have these artificial friends, so they're like robot kind of things, but they look like people and they act like people, and rich people buy them for like their kids so that they have friends around all the time, or like a sibling. Clara she's not like the top model of these artificial friends, but she has these like outstanding observational abilities, and so she is able to pick up on a lot of stuff that goes on around her. But because she's not because she's an artificial human, an artificial intelligence, she doesn't know everything. She learns as she goes, so we learn along with her. So that was actually a really, really fun way to explore this world. Ishiguro's writing is some of my favorite writing ever. And kind of the story is about, it's like a coming of age story, which a trope I love, about a robot. If you liked Never Let Me Go, I can pretty much guarantee that you'll like this book. If you did not like Never Let Me Go, I'm not sure whether you'll like this book, but it's worth a try. I was totally satisfied by the ending, but there was still so much like open for interpretation, so that was just fun. I loved how the AI in this book, or the AFs, were conceived. It was such a great interpretation and like kind of, ooh, is this going to happen in the future? So it was kind of cool. And really he's addressing in this book what makes a human, what makes a person, and kind of like the relationships and the history of that. The plot is like kind of pretty slow unraveling. Like not a huge amount happens with the book. It does kind of span a pretty large amount of time. And it definitely requires a little bit of time to kind of sit and be with the book and enjoy it and understand as you go. But yeah, I so recommend this book. The next book that I read, it's the first one that I actually have in person, is The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. So Remy and I, on our Getting Lit podcast this month, we talked about the book. So if I remember, I'll link that in the show note, in the below bar. But this book blew me away. Oh no, my review disappeared. Oh man. Okay, so I wrote a really long review about this book, but it doesn't matter. You can listen to the podcast about it. This book was amazing. It's a novel about like the forbidden union between two enslaved men in this plantation called Empty, the refuge they find in each other, and a betrayal that threatens their existence. I'm not going to talk too much about it because we did do a whole like 40-minute podcast on this book. But this book was so lyrically written, so beautifully written, like inspired, stunning, heartbreaking. Yeah, absolutely an incredible book that kind of goes back generations and generations and forwards to future generations to come. Yeah. Oh my goodness, for sure, 100% recommend this book. And also the cover is absolutely stunning. Yeah, so you have to listen to the podcast to hear more about that. Up next, I read Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. If you know anything about me, you'll know how much I loved Girl, Woman, Other. I plan on reading this book many, many more times. This book is about this guy called Barry. He's like this old dude. He's Antiguan, but he lives in Hackney in London, and he's like very flamboyant, and he's known for his like retro suits and like personality. And he's a husband and a father and a grandfather, and like in the neighborhood everybody knows each other and are friends. But for the last 60 years he's been in this relationship with his childhood friend, best friend, and soulmate, this guy Morris. So Carmel, who's his wife, she knows that he's been cheating on her, but she doesn't know what's actually going on. She doesn't know that it's Morris. And so it's kind of about the breakdown of their marriage. This book was so good. It was about like an unhappy marriage, but also this happy relationship, family and love and religion and culture. The location was like on point. Like you felt like you were there living in this neighborhood, one of these people like in the cafes. The character development was awesome. Barry kind of sucks, right? Like having a 60-year-long affair, kind of a shitty thing to do. But we're in his head for like most of the book, so as we read it, we get it, right? And we're rooting for him, and we want things to be happy. I love Evaristo's writing so much. This book packs a punch. It's super short. You'll remember it for a long time after. That's Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. We're getting to the end, I promise. Up next, we've got Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. This was another recommended read by Remy. I feel like most of us know this book right now, right? It's it's about the caste system and how traditionally we kind of associate it with like India and like Nazi Germany and places and times that were like, well, we don't do that now, of course, but this kind of brings it into like present day America. It was such an incredible read. It was really well written, really well argued, made you think a lot. Wilkerson is a stunning writer. Yeah, that's really what I have to say. The next book, I'm putting it in here for the count. I'm not going to talk about it a lot. I work in a fintech company, so I read this book called Lean UX, Designing Great Products with Agile Teams, because that's my job. It was fine. If you're into like tech stuff, Lean UX is great, right? The principles of it are awesome, and I think that they work and they're fun if you have like a small tight-knit team that you want to work with. The book itself was boring. You can read like the first 10 pages and be like, okay, I get the concept, let's do it. But instead, no, it's 200 pages of the same thing over and over again. So Lean UX, cool, that happened. The next book I read was one that I was insanely excited about. It's The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. If you remember last month or the month before, I read one of her other books. I don't remember what it's called. I read one of her other books and I loved it. This book I loved on a whole other level. This one is like third place for third best book of the month. My review literally says absolutely, undoubtedly, undeniably one of the best books I've ever read in my life. So clearly when I wrote it, I was in my feels a lot. This book tells the story of Shamara, who lives in Harlem and lives with like her super religious parents. Again, I guess it's a coming of age story, right? She's growing up and we watch her grow up and we understand all the awful, awful things that like teenage girls go through. She has a lot to say and she starts writing slam poetry, but she doesn't know what slam poetry. She just writes poetry. And then from there, she gets invited from her school teacher to join the poetry club, and where she can like read all her poems aloud. She catches feels for this boy named Aman, who her parents like cannot know about for many reasons. She's a twin, so we get to see that relationship, and it just gave me so much. I did a terrible job at explaining this book. I have notes and I didn't read any of them. But I folded down so many pages here. This book was absolutely amazing. I so recommend it. I'm like not someone who's a fan of slam poetry. I understand that there is great slam poetry out there, and there are some that I can listen to and really enjoy and really appreciate. But in general, as a concept, I find it a little bit cringe, a little bit embarrassing. But that's me. That's just me. And I'm really sorry about that, because I know people love it. It just isn't for me. But this book made me kind of wish that it was something that I enjoyed, because yeah, it was absolutely incredible. I would so recommend this to literally anybody. Doesn't matter if you're into poetry or not. The next book that I am going to talk about today is Yoga for Everybody. So that's by Jessamine Stanley. As the name of this channel suggests, I'm a yoga teacher. And I live in a city where every third person is a yoga teacher, and I understand that my appearance and natural, just the way that my body is built, means that it's pretty easy for me to walk into a studio, feel at home, go to a class, be told, okay, do this, and know that, yep, I got a pretty good chance of getting into whatever shape it is. And I recognize how lucky that is for me, you know? Jessamine Stanley, I first think I know about her through like Instagram or something, but she is an incredible yoga teacher. And basically this book is kind of, I guess, written partly to tell her story and her journey, but also partly to kind of encourage you, if you're a beginner or advanced or whatever, just to be able to find a way to bring your yoga practice into your at-home life. So it's kind of like a how-to section of the book. There's like easy to follow directions, like with all different types of bodies and like lots of really, really common yoga asanas, and also some sequences that you can practice at home, your own speed, your own time. Yeah, it was really great. It made me think a lot about my own teaching journey and kind of the way that I practice and the way that I teach. Yeah, I would really, really recommend this. One, if you're looking to get into yoga at home, or two, if you are a teacher and you think that maybe your horizons could be expanded a little bit. The next book that I've got on my list right here is The Poppy War. This is the first one in the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. This book, I really loved it, but I wanted to love it more than I did. There's a lot to unpack in the book. The first section, probably up until about here, I was so into it and I zoomed through it. The main character, Rin, is amazing. Again, another young badass female character. And the whole beginning of the book is set in this academy, and she gets into it and she's like, yeah, I'm going to be the fighter, and they have to pick a different discipline. It makes sense when you read it. It's a long book. It's 500 something pages. There's a lot to unpack. But then all the rest of the book is very war heavy. And I should have known that from the title of this book, but I did just kind of struggle with that a little bit. It was very strategy heavy, and I kind of thought it would be more about the drug effects of the poppies and the relationships and the school. I feel I probably will finish the trilogy or the series at some point. I just don't know when. That will be. I think that there are other fantasy series that I kind of want to get through first of all. I really want to read the Robin Hobb books. Yeah. So I did really like this. I just really wish that I had enjoyed it a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, we're getting there, I promise. I swear the final book that I finished this month, I finished on the last day of the month, is Sourdough by Robin Sloan. So this book is set in San Francisco. It was such a vibe. It was a bit weird, but when you're reading it, you don't realize how weird it is until kind of the end, and you're like, yeah, okay. But basically, it kind of combines the San Francisco tech world with bread making. If you read this book and do not finish by wanting to bake a bunch of loaves of bread, then I don't think it did its job. It doesn't provide you with a recipe, which kind of bummed me out a little bit. I really did think it was going to give me an amazing bread recipe that would smell like bananas. That's what they keep talking about. But yeah, this book it was such a good vibe. Basically Lois, she is busy, and she eats this weird goop stuff that everybody eats. And she works in this San Francisco tech thing where they make arms. And then she always orders food from this neighborhood, hole in the wall. But then they have to go back to their home country, and they give her their sourdough starter, and she starts baking bread. And it's all that. She starts selling it to the cafeteria at her workplace and the farmer's market, and all stuff happens. And then all this weird magical stuff happens. Oh, just read this book. It was a warm weird hug. Yeah, that's it, team. That's the March wrap up. It was a long month, I'm not gonna lie. A long month, but a good one. I've already finished my first book in April. Shout out to me. I've started 2 other books. Neither of them I'm super excited about, but one of them I think is really short. And the other one, it's a little long, but I purchased it a really long time ago and I need to read it. That's what happens when you don't read reviews or summaries before you buy books. You just don't pick them up. But that's it for me. If you have liked or enjoyed or want to read any of these books, please do let me know in the comments or just send me a message. Again, my podcast is Getting Literary. We're available everywhere that podcasts are found. And that's it, y'all. I will see you next month for my April wrap up. Bye.